you said that it's the opposite, like hyper grace is the opposite of legalism.
Right.
I forgot to ask you this last time, but where did the term legalism come from?
Yeah, well, it's just
like we just talked about where hyper grace came from.
Yeah, so legalism is just nothing more than coming from the idea of keeping law.
Okay.
Yeah, so legalists, therefore, are those who hold to the letter of the law.
What are Christian legalists holding to from the New Testament, or do they think that the Old Testament's more important?
So it's, and this is where, do I believe that, so for example, Dr. Paul Ellis, when he stated the three categories, I don't think he's wrong in the observation that those three categories exist. What I would say is there's more than that, but I don't disagree with him when he says that there's this category that's a mixed, he calls it a mixed grace gospel.
So you're saying that there are people who adhere to these things.
Yeah.
And so
correct.
They should be categories of
you can categorize them that way.
Okay.
And now I don't think it's always as clean as he has put it with, you know, anytime you categorize things in this such large generalities, you're going to miss things. Do I believe that there is a group that says, hey, we want you to start, you're saved by grace, but now you got to do all these works. Yeah, that's been going on since early church time.
Right.
Paul addresses that in Galatians 3 when he says, you've begun by the Spirit, but now all of a sudden you're going to try to run this race. The rest of, like, you got saved, but now you're going to do everything else just by your own strength, or in other words, by doing works of the law. And Paul's going, this is, he actually calls them foolish. You're foolish for doing this.
Yeah.
And
aren't you not supposed to say that word?
Foolish?
Doesn't the Bible say that we're not supposed to call each other
a fool?
Yeah. Or is that legalistic from the Old Testament?
No, it's not legalism, but it's also understanding context.
Okay.
Right. So if I'm called, anyway, I won't get into all this, but let me get back to your question.
Yeah. Sorry.
Let me get back to your question of legalism and where does legalism come come from in the church? Like, where is it manifested? Where is it seen?
Like, who coined the term?
Man, I don't know. That's a good question. I'd have to actually look that up. Who coined the term?
Okay.
Like they're legalists, or legalism. I think
is that derogatory too? Or would
it'd be derogatory, but I'm not sure it's a wrong derogatory. Like, it can be depending on who you're labeling as a legalist. Right. Okay. And so for example, for the hyper grace preachers, probably anyone that's not at their extreme would be illegal. Like, they would be in legalism in their mind.
It's okay to call them hyper grace teachers.
Yeah.
Because you're forgiven. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. Okay. Lord have mercy. And so, but yeah, I do believe there's a faction in Christianity that's actually pretty large, if I'm being honest, that says, come to salvation by grace. Now that you're here, here's all the rules we need you to keep.
Right.
And that's legalism at the core. That is what Ellis was talking about when he said, saved by grace, but sanctified through works.
So hyper grace teachers would be like, come get saved by grace, and then here's all the rules that you don't need to keep.
They're not going to talk about rules at all, man. They're like, but so for the laws or the rules that are kind of being taught by the quote unquote legalist are the Old Testament laws.
Well, if hyper grace people never want to mention hell, then they're at least legalistic about saying that.
In other words, they're making some very legalistic statements. Yes. Right.
Yes.
Right. You don't need to ask for forgiveness.
Got them.
You don't need to ask for forgiveness.
Right.
You're just being legalistic about that.
Right, but never say hell.
Yeah.
Damn it.
But you're forgiven.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Oh, I'm good.
And so there is that teaching in the church that is really leaning on more of an Old Testament. By Old Testament, what we really mean is the Mosaic covenant, or the covenant that God gave Moses and the Israelites, that where the law, the Ten Commandments, the priests, so on and so forth are found. I think that when we say Old Covenant or Old Testament, that's really what we're meaning. oftentimes, this old covenant that the Israelites were in with God during that time period with Moses. Some people call it the covenant at Sinai. But so my point just being is, if we're still holding to that, it's like that's true. All of that's true for us today. That's legalism.
Yeah.
Or if we're creating a lot of laws and traditions,
or if we're saying never read it ever, that's hyper grace.
Which is kind of legalism,
right?
But I'm starting to catch on this
right?
stuff. Yeah. And but isn't this what happens when you have extremes?
Yeah, you just make fun of it the whole time.
Well, but also in extremes, you've got extremes.
Plot holes.
Yeah, and they create exclusive truth claims.
Right.
Like extreme, like all Christians have exclusive truth claims, but like
right.
Anytime you're into extremes, it's just like, they. It's so frustrating because it's like, even reading the book, like I'm trying to be empathetic toward the hyper grace preachers in some ways, trying to understand where they're coming from. And then when they make the statement that they're the only ones who are actually preaching grace correctly, and you're just like, oh, it's frustrating. Or that if
sounds like you're saying someone's doing something wrong by not teaching it correctly.
Yeah.
Wow. That's not very grace of you.
Not a lot of grace there, huh? Yeah. But again,
extremes.
Extremes.